I'm Kyle. I run the Lowe's Innovation Labs. Who has heard of Lowe's Home Improvement? Okay, good. Well, looks like most of you. Lowe's is a Fortune 50 retailer. We sell DIY home improvement things. We're based primarily in North America, but we also have a joint venture in Australia as well. But I'm going to talk about how we are thinking about the future and how we're building stuff for the future. So I'll jump right into it. All right. So this is the world in which we live. It's change in time. So did you know you lived in this graph? Because you do. These are the jokes, people. Like, it doesn't get, this is it, right? Got to work with me here. It's late in the afternoon. I got in here at 2 in the morning. Got to work with me, okay? All right, this is the way we're taught, right? So you go to school, you work at your first company, second company, third company, whatever. And the idea is that if you diligently work hard enough, little by little, that you'll kind of inch along this proverbial path to somewhere to improve your product or service, right? The problem with this is there's a deception here in that this is really the linear path to doom, right? If you look at the recent history, the long-term history, but specifically the recent history, especially in retail, just improving your stuff is not any guarantee that you will improve, let alone exist, right? Look at Blockbuster. I mean, you could go down the list, right? The people that were working at Blockbuster were not Enron types. They weren't doing terrible things. They were just operating in this linear way when, in fact, they were living in a boom exponential world. So the fun thing about exponential curves is that they compound on each other. And it gets steeper and steeper and steeper. And so you're going to see over time things that would have lasted, you could have kind of skated along the curve on this linear path for a while and been just fine, even a generation, that won't work anymore because this curve is getting faster and faster. The other fun thing about exponential curves is that the output, although it looks linear and up, is actually very dynamic and hard to predict. So it's very hard to tell what's going to come. So the old ways of scenario planning and thinking about the future and just saying, oh, what if we lived in a world without X, and then planning against it won't really work in the ways that it has in the past. You have to think about things differently. Cool. All right, so we live in an exponential world, but I'm operating in a linear path. Pretty much all organizations operate for the linear path, and that's okay. That's not only okay, that's really good. You don't want us doing the accounting. You do need people that's the bulk of the organization, should just be keeping the ship going. But you do need some folks on the outside to operate and to explore in this exponential world. If you really believe that, and if you don't, you shouldn't play out there. But we do. We believe in it. So let me talk about it a little bit. There's also some interesting things about the exponential curve. One is that anything that's truly new and different initially is met with what? Great hype. And then when people try it out, there's a massive disappointment. Because anything truly new and different usually is not that great. But that's why this is the deceptive part of the curve. People will make fun of it. They'll say, oh, that's dumb. That'll never work out. It's not worth the money. But there's this core group that continues to work on it little by little, little by little. And then all of a sudden, seemingly out of nowhere, it breaks free of the linear path. And the expectation begins to match the customer or whoever with their demand. I think a good example of this is virtual reality. Like virtual reality has been around forever. In the 90s, it was around for a long time. It was just quite terrible. And people made fun of it, and then it disappeared. And then all of a sudden, with the advent of Oculus Rift and others, all of a sudden it's out. And it's everywhere. And now everyone and their brother is trying to figure out how to use virtual and augmented reality in their business. And that's the deceptive point of the curve. Really what you need to do is be working during this part, building infrastructure and systems and strategy about how this is actually going to work in a world where this is the disruptive opportunity. Ask the guys from Oculus how they're doing in this disruptive future, and they're doing quite fine, right? So how do you know what to work on during this deceptive disappointment part of the curve in order to take advantage of this disruptive opportunity? That is the entire crux of what we do, is we try to identify what to work on at the beginning part, the stuff that people are going to make fun of, the stuff that's not quite ready for prime time right now, in order to prepare for this disruptive opportunity. Does that make sense? Okay, good. All right. Just to further reiterate the point here, In the 20s, 1920, the average time on the S&P 500 was 67 years. And now it's only 15 years. And my guess is that's going to continue to get faster and faster. And if you look at the kind of companies that are on that list in 1920 and the kind that are on today, very, very different. So if you think your organization is fine, or you guys are just going to be just okay, you are further down the linear path than you think, right? And if you ever hear that inside your company, like, oh, we're good, we can just skate, we'll be just fine, not a good thing, right? Because we really do live in an exponential world. All right, great. We live in an exponential world. What do? How do we identify what to work on? Oh, I'm glad I'm going to talk about that. Is that the question you had, sir? Yeah, definitely. This guy, yeah, definitely. Okay, so next, of course, I'm going to talk about the John F. Kennedy assassination. Good. All right, they're still there. All right, so clearly that's what I'm going to talk about. So the first is opportunity overkill. If you can literally do anything, you can literally do anything, and that can be its own disruption. So in November 22nd, 1963, this was the day that President Kennedy was shot. Is everyone aware that this happened? He was assassinated? Good. Okay, I'm glad to hear that. Okay, this is a big, big event, right? The entire world knows about this. Who shot John F. Kennedy? Does anyone know? Oswald, maybe, right? There are a lot of movies and books that would beg to differ, right? But this was when he was shot, this was not done in a back corner somewhere. He was shot in the open, in a press event, while people were lined on both sides of the streets with cameras rolling. And yet we still don't know who shot him. Well, we have an idea, but there's theories against it, right? So it seems very obvious. So this is from the famous Zapruder film, and this is the exact moment that President Kennedy shot. Right after a traumatic national event like 9/11 or something like that, the world is down is up and left is right and everything's crazy. So immediately after he shot the FBI, the CIA, the local cops, everybody were trying to find anything that looked out of the ordinary, and then they were going to try to figure out who these people were, and they were going to try to capture them, right? Makes sense. So this is the famous film. This is not Photoshopped. This is really real. And the exact moment that President Kennedy shot, they were going through the film, and they saw this. So it's November. It's Dallas, Texas. It's hot. If you look at the rest of these people, no one has an umbrella out. There's not a cloud in the sky. People are just kind of wearing like just normal shirts, no jackets, the whole thing. So if the exact minute that President Kennedy shot, you see this, what do you think? What's the deal with the dude with the umbrella and the three-piece black wool suit? Kind of weird, right? So they've spent, once again, we're going to laugh at this, but think about the context in which this happened. Something terrible has happened. Anything's possible at this point. You really have to explore every angle. So thousands and thousands of hours were spent looking for this dude, which they very creatively started calling the Umbrella Man. And this became known as the Umbrella Man theory. So, of course, they couldn't find this guy. But there were, of course, lots of speculation on who this guy might be and which weird affiliations that he had. No one knew who he was, but they knew that he had something to do with the assassination, right? So he was either working for the mafia or the Soviets or whatever. And this is what they believe. Like, people believe that he had this, like, penguin gun from the old Batman series, that he had, like, this rifle, and then he was able to shoot. And if anyone remembers high school physics, this is actually a pretty difficult math problem, let alone actually trying to do it. But people actually thought this, right? Do you want to know who this guy really was? All right, so this guy's name was Louis Stephen Witt. He didn't have anything to do with the assassination. He was just a weird guy doing a very strange thing at the worst possible time. So what he was doing, actually, was well, before I get to that, what he was doing was he was protesting. He wasn't protesting John F. Kennedy. He was protesting John F. Kennedy's father, who was the he was the ambassador to the UK and best buddies with the prime minister, who was this guy here, Neville Chamberlain. And Neville Chamberlain, kind of like Steve Jobs, always wore the same thing. And he always wore a black three-piece suit and always carried around in a black umbrella, pretty much no matter the situation. So in Louis Stephen Witt, and by the way, those two pretty much built the appeasement policies that most people believe led to World War II. So Louis Stephen Witt, in his mind, is like, man, I'm going to dress up like John F. Kennedy's dad's friend, and I'm going to stand outside of the motorcade with my umbrella open, and somehow when the president comes whizzing by in his motorcade that he's going to tie it all together and somehow be affected by this very weird protest. That's what's going on in this guy's mind. But at the time, it was once again the worst possible time. All of the thousands of hours that were spent trying to find this guy wasted, because clearly he had nothing to do with it. So, why do I bring up this very weird Umbrella Man thing? Well, I like conspiracy theories a lot. So I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but I love conspiracy theories. And why? The reason why I love conspiracy theories is that everyone can look at the same exact set of data or the exact set of circumstances, trying to come away with the exact same conclusion, trying to answer the same question, who shot President Kennedy, and come away with crazily different theories, right? In every organization, there are conspiracy theories. You might be a conspiracy theorist yourself inside of your organization. And you might be right? The real question is, how do you decipher between the Umbrella Man stuff, the kind of things that we laugh at now, and the really important things like maybe pointing to the book depository or the grassy knoll? So it's very hard in the moment to figure out what to do, but very critically important to know which problems to work on. Does anyone agree that we should? Has anyone ever worked on an Umbrella Man problem before? Oh, I promise you have, and you might be right now. Okay. The second is Newton's first law. Does anybody know what Newton's first law is? Which is? This guy, if you're looking for a job, good man here. He's right. An object in motion tends to stay in motion or at rest, tends to stay at rest unless acted upon by an unbalanced force, right? So here comes the joke, the obligatory joke that I always have to give. I'm unbalanced, so that's why this applies. But you have to have something on the outside. Remember, back to the curve. You have to have something on the outside to push or pull to move that line up or down or left or right. Now, organizations are made up of people, and people are irrational, but predictably irrational. So every organization that you've been in, whether it be religious or academic or whatever, it has biases, and it likes to do this thing or that thing. It has certain weird habits that don't make any sense, right? And you can use that in order to move the organization one way or the other. And you have to, or else it won't exist for very much longer. Okay? Does everyone agree with that? Your organization's irrational, just differently irrational than mine. Okay. This all builds up to my cousin here. It's not my cousin. Back to the linear path, what I would do is I'd have something important to convince very important people like you guys, ask for money or air cover or something to do something that I wanted to do, and I would do what we're taught to do, and that was to build a killer PowerPoint presentation. And so I would spend like countless hours building this PowerPoint, whatever, and I would give it, and 9 times out of 10, people would go, man, that was an amazing presentation, and then nothing would happen at all afterwards. I was so tired of giving good presentations that didn't do anything. I don't care about the presentation. I only gave the presentation in order to get you to do something. And if I didn't get you to do something, that thing that I wanted, it was a failure, right? Who's given a good presentation that didn't go anywhere afterwards? Wow, you guys are way better at this than I am. Wow, okay. Well, I want to go to your talk next. Okay, so tying this all together, Newton's first law, how do we identify the Umbrella Man problems versus the other problems, and then this presentation issue. So I started experimenting with a lot of different ways to do this, and what we finally landed on was this thing called science fiction prototyping, and then we modified it for our purposes. But basically what we do is we give all of our marketing research and trend data to professional published science fiction writers, real science fiction writers. They create probable futures where these tech and trends might probably converge. Think Back to the Future Part 2, right? And then what we do is we turn those real stories with narrative arcs and conflicts and resolution, the whole bit, into real comic books. And the reason why we do that is because I can guarantee that your executive team has not received a strategic document in comic book form. Right? And we don't do PowerPoints. Yeah, thank you. All right. I like this crowd. And it's true. So what happens is they're laughing the first time, and I don't do it anymore, but I kind of giggle and laugh. Like, oh my gosh, if someone does this and it's not us, we're in deep, deep trouble. And it changes the conversation from all of the technical stuff that I'm interested in, and we talk about the outcome, which is far more important. And it's about the story. Very easy to do. It's the only thing that I've seen I can talk to the cashier about and the CEO and use the exact same document, and they all build on it in their way. All right. So very quickly, I want to talk about the Hollow Room. Who's heard of the Hollow Room? Oh, just a couple of people. This guy, yeah. Okay, so The Hollow Room is the first augmented and virtual reality showrooms and stores, and they were in Canada. Basically, what it was this came out of a science fiction narrative. This was the first time that we had done this, and what came out of the story was this couple is redesigning their kitchen, and they're doing it with this heads-up device. Now, this all seems so obvious now, but this story came out before Oculus Rift did, and before what I call the VR revolution. And so we were able to work backwards and to build something very, very rough in order to create what we call the bat signal. And the bat signal is we do a couple of store tests, but we very loudly talk about it so that we can attract you guys, so we can attract all the small, medium, and large-sized companies to hopefully they'll come to us with their stuff before somebody else, one of our competitors. And then we can build that future together and try to get to this actual narrative or beyond faster than anybody else. And we're doing that. It's worked. We've got some great announcements later, not today, but in the future, related to this, but it works. And this is some of the early stuff. It was through an iPad using AR, which we can talk about later. And this was the horrible giant box that I'm incredibly embarrassed of now, but that's all part of the process, right? If you want to build something crazy, you have to start with the first thing, the best thing you can do right then, and then inch along. Not on the linear path, but on the exponential path. So we got better at it. We built autonomous robots. So from scratch, starting in January of last year, we had this story about the changing, how retail could actually change. The actual in-store experience would be different. And with a robotics startup out of Singularity University, we built these robots from scratch. So they're autonomous robots. It's called Oshbot because it's an Orchard Supply hardware store that we own. Very clever name, I know. And it does a lot of cool things. It's autonomous, it rolls around, it talks to you, you talk to it speaks multiple languages. You can have like a random screw or hinge or whatever, hold it up to the 3D depth sensing camera. It'll tell you what it is and if we have it. And it does a lot of other things, gathers analytics and a whole bunch of other things. There's more of Oshbot there. And then the last one that we've announced is 3D scanning and printing. And so you can bring in do we have a picture? Yeah. This is, once again, we build these things super quick, but you can bring in any broken part or anything at all. We will scan it for you. We will digitally piece it back together for you, and you can print it in any material pretty much. Gold, silver, steel, plastic, anything. And it gives people the opportunity to really manipulate and to modify and to customize just about anything. And I can tell you that the scanning feature of this 3D printing and scanning was really important. And the reason why this works, I think, better than we had hoped is because it was driven by narrative. We didn't want to just drop a bunch of 3D printers inside of a store. We wanted to try to approach a solution. And everyone wants the ability to fix stuff that's broken. It's a big reason why they come to our stores. And if we can do that digitally, why not? There's some more there. And then lastly, this is us at the Today Show with the robot. That's Carson Daly. Might not be as big a celebrity here in India, but he was a big deal in the US. So we had the robot live on stage, live all morning, introducing segments and having interviews and stuff. We were I was super nervous that something was going to happen. Live demo for something it was not supposed to do. That was a lot of fun. But the reason why we do this once again is talk very loudly about what we do is in order to attract other like-minded people. So the critical component about what we do is what we call uncommon partnerships. So it's worded awkwardly on purpose. The first part is it's uncommon. You wouldn't expect Lowe's to work with a robotic startup out of Singularity. You wouldn't expect us to build robots and hollow rooms and all these other things. But it's done through partnerships. And then that's the real thing, is that when we work with people, with organizations, we have real partnerships, which means we don't just throw a problem over the fence. We invite you in and we talk very frankly, we iterate very quickly in order to, once again, achieve that narrative as fast as possible and hopefully to surpass it. So lastly, I just want to reiterate again that we live in an exponential world. And I think the best example of that, and this is self-serving, of course, is that Lowe's is doing this stuff I don't think anyone would have thought Lowe's would do, which is we're building stuff not just new to the world of retail things, which we are, but new to the world just tech things. And our partnerships are growing, and that just shows that if you want to make a change, if you want to do something, anyone can do it. And that's it.